In this video we will continue our discussion of the consumer theory. Now before proceeding with the slides here, I would like to introduce a few terms. So first one is the normal good. It's the type of good for which quantity demanded increases when income increases. And inferior good, note that it's not the poor quality good, it's just when our income increases we consume less of this good. So quantity demanded decreases with the income increasing. Now another important 2 points here is that a change in income induces a shift in consumer budget. I should say budget constraint here. So the consumer will be able to afford more quantities of bundles, and also there's a shift to a new indifference curve. What it means is that with a higher income, consumer will be able to enjoy bundles of goods that give higher utility. So let's move on and discuss this in graphs. So here is a case of two normal goods, barbecue ribs and corn on the cob. When the income of the consumer increases, let's say from 10,000, so that's income, let's say Y income 1 to income 2 to 20,000. That when the income was 10,000, the consumer was able to afford within this budget constraint, the two goods within this budget constraint, but because their income increased, now they are able to buy greater amounts of each of these goods. So that means their budget constraint now is the red line here, and at the same time they are now along this budget constraint able to enjoy higher utilities as well. I mean total utilities. So indifference curve 1, indifference curve 2. So indifference curve 1 gives this consumer, let's say 50 utils. Indifference curve 2 gives this consumer 100 utils now, given that they are now able to consume greater quantities. So there is a shift from this point to this point, at the same time increase from this point to this point. So assuming that their optimal quantity bundles are point A originally, now move to point B. In this case, notice that consumption of both goods now increased with the income increasing. So that's because ribs and corn on the cob are treated as normal goods. Now how about the inferior goods? Let me put this down here again just as a reference. So this is the Y1 income 1, and this is income 2. So this is 2,000 now, 20,000 now. Let's say the income increased and there is a shift in the budget line from that point in the extreme to this point, and then obviously so that's also shifting. So there's a rightward shift here. Now what happened is that our optimal point was point A, but now it's point B. With the new movement from point A to point B, there's a quantity demanded decline for coleslaws, while there's a greater increase in quantity consumed in barbecue ribs. Remember, we said if a good is inferior, then when income rises we consume less of it. That's exactly what happened here. When Matt's income increased from 10,000 to 20,000, his intake of coleslaw declined, as you can see, but his intake of barbecue ribs actually increased by a greater extent. As a result, we see the shift from point A to point B. So coleslaw is effectively an inferior good. Let's have also look at the case where price changes and then income doesn't change. So let's go back to Russell's example here with $3,000 income, and we have the original $10 price per steak and original $2.50 per avocado price. And initial optimum was point A, where Russell is consuming 800 avocados and 100 units of steak. Now let's assume that the price of steak decreased to $6. So that means steak is relatively cheaper than avocados in this case, and also that allows Russell to buy more steaks because now it's cheaper than before. Before it was 10 pounds, so the $4 cheaper. So what happens is that then when he was spending all his $3,000 and at the price of $10 per steak, he was consuming 300 units. So this is 3,000 over 10. That would give him a 300 unit bundle. Now after the price decrease, he is gonna consume more, he's gonna enjoy more steaks. is the same income as before. It's just the price is changing, so that gives him a 500 units of steaks. Yeah, so this is his point where he would consume 0 avocados and only 500 units of steaks. Now this would be our new budget line. There's a so the budget line basically pivots out sort of here to this point, and the red line will be our budget line. Now what about the optimal combination of goods that Russell now consumes? It turns out Russell feels like he has more income now, because with cheaper steaks now his purchasing power is increasing, so it gives him kind of a more real income. But at the same time, Russell feels like the price of avocados are higher now. Yeah, so avocados are more expensive relative to steaks. Yeah, now notice where the optimal point is. Optimal point is now at a lower point. Yeah, in terms of moving from left to right. If you move from left to right, you will see that the point C is at a lower point than A from the y-axis perspective, but from the x-axis perspective now it's actually at a higher point, yeah, in terms of steaks. So what happened is that the cheaper steaks makes the income look like a greater, yeah, relative to the quantities that Russell can buy. So his real income, real purchasing power is higher. However, because now steaks are cheaper than the avocados, Russell would prefer buying more steaks. So on one hand he feels richer, but on the other hand he also feels like avocados are more expensive. So he reduces his intake of avocados from 800 units to 600 units and compensates that reduction with buying more steaks here. So he in the end buys 250 units of steaks and 600 units of avocados. Originally it was 100 and 800 units here. Yes, so the new optimal bundle is this point C, and because steaks are cheaper now, he buys more and reduces his avocado intake. There are two effects at play in this case. I'll discuss that in the next slide. There are income effects and substitution effect. So a fall in the price of steak has two effects on Russell's optimal consumption of goods. Yeah. So first is the income effect. As we mentioned in the previous slide, reduction in the price of steak increases Russell's purchasing power, because now the goods are cheaper. He can actually continue consuming exactly the same unit and still save some money, but he may also consume more steaks, and also some money will be left to buy more avocados. Yeah. And at the same time, there is also substitution effect, because falling in the price of steaks makes avocados more expensive relative to steaks. Russell might think, okay, I want to buy fewer avocados, yeah, and then more steak, just like the example here we have seen. Yeah, other effect could also be possibility. For example, income effect could also be dominant as well, but in this example we had a substitution effect dominating. Yeah. Now let's look at an example of income and substitution effects and how they play out. Now, as before, we have the point A as the optimal point and point C as the last optimal point here after the price change. When the price decreased from $10 to $6, we have a new red budget constraint line here, and the blue budget constraint line was the original budget constraint line, with then point A being the optimal bundle point here. Yeah, so this is the consumer equilibrium. At this point, Russell was consuming 800 units of avocados and 100 units of steaks. Now notice that when there is a price change, we would usually expect a movement along the indifference curve. That's what happened here. So when the price of steaks decreased, we moved from point A to point B because there was a substitution effect. In other words, Russell decided to reduce his consumption of avocados to this point originally, and to compensate for the loss in the avocados, increase his consumption of steak to this point here. Yeah, at this point here. So there's an increase here and there's a decrease here. This is substitution effect, the movement from point A to B along the same utility curve. Yeah, so this is still I1. He's still getting 100 units of satisfaction, let's say. However, there is also something called income effect. This is when we feel like we have more income, so we can still consume more of two goods. Yeah, so in this case we would expect to ourselves to move into a new indifference curve. Let's say this indifference curve gives us 200 utils. Yeah. So from point B now we jump to point C, because we still have income even at this point. For example, this point, by the way, is below our budget constraint. Anything below the budget constraint line is affordable, but we would like to be along the budget constraint line and spend all our income. In that case, we move from point B to point C because of the income effect, because we're feeling like we have more income given that the steaks are cheaper and we have more money left to buy a little bit more avocados. So moving from point B to point C gives us an increase in the a little bit increase in the consumption of avocados, and at the same time a little bit increase in the consumption of steaks. So in the end, Russell will settle at this point C and consume 250 units of steaks and 600 units of avocados, and he will get 200 utils from this bundle. Yeah. So this is how substitution effect and the income effects play out. It turns out the substitution effect dominates, because in the end we have lower amount of avocados and higher amount of steaks. What if income effect dominates? In that case, I'll have to draw this to demonstrate here. We'll see a slightly different eventuality. So here's our old line, this is our new budget line. Let's say this is I1, and let's say this is point A, and this is our I2 here. So we move to point B. Notice what happened here is, so this is original quantities with 800, so nothing changed with the old budget line. Now with the price decrease, giving Russell increase in purchasing power, Russell's optimal point moved to point B. That's gonna give him a higher amount of, let's say, 1000 units of is this amount, 1000 units of avocados, and let's say 300 units of steaks. Now he settles on this point that because income effect is now dominating. When the price decreased, Russell substitutes some of the avocados with steaks, so there is a movement downwards here. So I'm going to draw that point B again somewhere here. Let's say this is point B, so he is going to reduce his intake of, let's say, avocados to 600 units, but increase his intake of steaks to 250 as before. But because now he feels he's richer than before, he would then want to jump to point B here, yeah, because he's got more income now, and his income constraint is this line, yeah. So he's able to jump to point B. When he sorry, this is B, isn't it? So this will be C then. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, this is our point B, C. So in that case, that increase would be higher than the decrease in the substitution effect. Yeah. So when he does jump to the higher I2, so this was, if you remember, 100 utils, and this is 200 utils. So when he jumps from point B to C, loss of this 200 units avocado with the substitution effect will be compensated, in fact overcompensated for by increase in the avocado consumption due to the income effect. So now the next jump will be to this point here, while in terms of the increase in the consumption of steaks, it will also be a jump from this point to this point. Yeah, so he's going to increase his consumption of both of the goods. Yeah, so in this case, income effect dominates. So this is the reason why we mentioned here that the net effect on avocados in this case was ambiguous, because it really depends on whether income effect dominates or substitution effect dominates. Yeah.